Airing first on Asheville FM, this is The Final Straw, a weekly anarchist, anti-authoritarian radio show broadcasting from occupied Saligi land in southern Appalachia. We bring you voices and perspectives from people, projects, and struggles around the world engaging in the long project toward liberation. You can email us with questions or suggestions at thefinalstrawradio@riseup.net or at protonmail.com, or send us letters at P.O. Box 6004, Asheville, North Carolina 28816. This show is brought to you by Firestorm Books and Coffee. Located at 610 Haywood Road, Firestorm is a locally owned co-op specializing in offbeat, underground, and independent literature. You can find a sample of Firestorm's books and zines, plus a full calendar of events at their website, firestorm.coop. This week you'll hear a conversation with ShineWhite. ShineWhite is the former spokesperson for the National White Panther Organization, a part of the United Panther movement. There was quite recently a split, and ShineWhite is now affiliated with the Revolutionary Intercommunal Black Panther Party. He's currently held at Alexander Correctional Institution in Taylorsville, North Carolina. In this conversation, ShineWhite talks about the White Panther Organization that he was representing at the time of this chat, how he became politicized in North Carolina prisons, the terrible conditions amidst the COVID pandemic and beyond, anti-racist and anti-capitalist organizing in the NCDPS system, the use of the security threat group status in NC prisons, and reprisals he's faced for his call-out in 2018 for NC prisoners to participate in a prison strike, which dovetailed well with the nationwide prison strike of that year, as well as other organizing. You'll notice that it's me in bursts reading out this interview, and not ShineWhite's voice specifically. This is because this interview was conducted via mail over the course of a few weeks. And you can check out more of his writings at ShineWhite.Home.Blog. Stay tuned to the end of the interview for Sean Swain's yearly memorial piece, where he reads out all of the names of people who were killed by police the previous year.
You're listening to a Channel Zero Network podcast. The Channel Zero Network is a decentralized network of anarchist podcasts bringing you analysis of current events, media criticism, rebellious music, interviews with academics and authors, how-tos, and so much more.
This is The Final Straw Radio, a weekly anarchist and anti-authoritarian radio show broadcasting out of occupied Saligi land in southern Appalachia.
Hello, and welcome to Live Like the World is Dying, your podcast for what feels like the end times. I'm your host, Margaret Killjoy.
What's up, y'all? I'm Pearson, host of Coffee with Comrades.
You've been listening to Rebel Steps. I'm your host, Liz. Believe in yourself, trust one another, and get organized.
Hello, this is Linda. You're listening to Subversion 1312 on the Channel Zero Network.
Whether you are anarcho-curious or a hardened militant, CZN's ever-growing roster of programs has something for you. Head over to channelzeronetwork.com to find out more.
Hey, radicals, anarchists, and all of you liberatory leftists. Are you a podcaster, video maker, multimedia artist, or writer? The Institute for Anarchist Studies wants to let you know we have grants available for projects focusing on Black and Indigenous anarchisms, police abolition and alternatives, and mutual aid. Priority will be given to short audio, video, and multimedia projects that give foundations, definition, or further educate folks on the topics of Black and Indigenous anarchisms, police abolition and alternatives, and mutual aid. We'll accept proposals for written work too. Priority for grants is focused on smaller projects and multimedia makers from underrepresented identities with financial need. A total of $1,000 in grants is available. For details and how to apply, visit anarchiststudies.org and click on the grants application post on our main page. That's anarchiststudies.org, anarchiststudies.org. Applications close January 31st, 2021. Spread the word and tell your friends. The Institute for Anarchist Studies, or the IAS, started in 1996 to support the development of contemporary anarchism. We give grants to writers and culture makers, co-publish books with AK Press, and publish the journal Perspectives on Anarchist Theory. Learn more about the IAS at anarchiststudies.org or find us on your social channels by searching for Institute for Anarchist Studies.
For the listening audience, would you please introduce yourself with your name, location, and how you came to be there?
Foremost, all power to the people. My name is Joseph Stewart, but I am known by my comrades and others as Comrade ShineWhite. I am the national spokesperson for the White Panther Organization. I'm currently being held at Alexander Correctional, one of North Carolina's worst prisons, due to the racist and prejudicial beliefs that are espoused by the administration, all the way down to the slave patrol guards who patrol the concrete fields of this razor wire plantation. Alexander Correctional is located in a rural area of North Carolina. The ratio of whites to people of color who are employed here is 8-1. The environment is very hostile. I was emergency transferred here a couple of months ago during this pandemic, despite the courts ordering prison officials to halt all transfers to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. I was transferred from Central Prison due to my political organizing there. Within the past 4 years, I've been transferred from facility to facility, which is a tactic used by prison officials to stifle my advocacy efforts, to impede me from organizing prisoners, which is vital if we intend to redress and ameliorate the living conditions within these prisons.
How did you come to be politicized, and what is the nature of your current endeavor?
I'm a firm believer that poverty and repression compels one to become politicized. But there was an incident that occurred to me while I was in the county jail awaiting trial for the charges I am currently incarcerated for that was a catalyst for my politicization. It was in 2012. I had assaulted a guard that was employed at the county jail that had been antagonizing me for several months. It wasn't an average assault. I had taken it to the extreme. For this, I wasn't placed in a regulatory solitary confinement cell. I was placed behind the wall, which is a cell that's secluded from everything and everyone. Placed in the cell with nothing but the jail uniform I had on, there was nothing to do but to reflect on life and what the future would look like if I continued living the way that I was. Engaging in lumpen activities, failing to realize that imposing the oppression I was subjected to on others made me a proxy of those I claimed I hated. As the days passed, boredom began to set in. I decided to get down and do some push-ups. As I was on the ground, I happened to look under the bed and noticed a book in the far corner. Crawling under the bed, retrieving the book, I noticed the words "blood in my eye." Assuming that it was an urban fiction that was based on the street formation I was representing, I quickly got back on the bed and attempted to read the book. I say attempted because at the time I was unable to read or write past the 6th grade level. I spent most of my adolescent years in and out of state institutions. An education wasn't the primary focus of those who ran these reform schools, group homes, etc. Unable to read or comprehend the book, I became frustrated and I threw it to the side. By this time, I had been told by the guards who would bring me my 3 meals a day that I wasn't leaving the cell unless I made bond or was sent to prison. My days were spent trying to read George's book. Weeks had passed, and I was still unable to read the majority of the book. I began to write all the words I could not pronounce or understand on the walls of the cell. This went on for months before anyone noticed. One morning, a sergeant of the jail, whom I had known my entire life, brought me my breakfast tray, noticed the walls covered in writing, questioned what I had going on. I explained that the words on the wall were out of a book I was trying to read. I wrote the words on the wall to memorize them, so once I had access to a dictionary, I would look them up. He asked me what I was reading. I showed him the book that had been thrown across the cell many times, bent up, and been cursed by me out of frustration stemming from my inability to read it. Weeks passed before this same sergeant came back to visit with me. Bringing me my breakfast, he had 2 books in his hand, and a notepad. He said if I agreed to stop writing on the walls and clean off what I had already written, he would give me the books and the notepad. Quickly agreeing, I was handed over a Webster's Dictionary, Solid Ed Brother, and a notebook. Neglecting to eat my tray, there was a word that I had been dying to look up the meaning of. Revolutionary. One engaged in revolution. Quickly moving on to search for the word revolution. Revolution. A sudden, radical, or complete change. I asked myself, am I revolutionary? What am I changing? Not fully comprehending what revolution was at the time, I moved on to other words, but the question, am I a revolutionary, continued to enter my mind. I wanted to make a change. I wanted to be a revolutionary because George had been a revolutionary, and he spoke highly of other revolutionaries. A revolutionary is smart. I wanted to be smart. Revolutionaries fought. I wanted to fight. I had to become a revolutionary. I didn't fully understand what a revolutionary was, but yet I knew I had to become one. To become one, I had to become smart. The dictionary was my best friend. Reading George's books were painstaking in the beginning. I had to stop every other word to look up its meaning. Comrade George changed me. He revolutionized me in a small cell secluded from everyone for 9 months. I had become politicized. Sentenced close to 20 years, I've been feeding my consciousness ever since. I don't tell a lot of people, but I have a learning disability that becomes discouraging at times. It's difficult for me to grasp what I'm reading the first time. I have to read it over and over before I'm fully able to comprehend it. I'm self-educated. The past 4 years of my life was spent in solitary confinement. I've recently been released to general population thanks to the support of my outside network coordinating a national campaign to have me released. Solitary confinement compels me to either grow or die mentally. I used my time to further my education in areas that would benefit the movement. Being that I am incarcerated and will remain incarcerated for at least the next 7 years, my primary focus is to build up the White Panther Organization within prisons nationwide. For a revolutionary or a liberator of the people who is incarcerated, our primary focus should be to transform these razor wire plantations into schools of liberation. Thus, upon their release, prisoners can return to their communities armed with an education that would enable them to transform their communities into base areas of cultural, social, and political revolution. This is the necessary first step of the Revolutionary War.
Would you tell us in some detail about the White Panther Organization, its philosophy, and its activities as you can?
The WPO serves as an arm of the People's Vanguard, the New African Black Panther Party, NABPP, whose primary purpose is to lead the fight against national oppression and link this to international proletarian revolution. Our ideological and political line is Pantherism. The politics of Pantherism is revolutionary nationalism and internationalism, illuminated by Marxism, Leninism, Maoism. Our strategy for revolution is a national and international united front against imperialism. Our job as White Panthers is to put in work among the white masses and poor white communities, winning them over to support the Panther 10-point program. The 10-point programs of both the NABPP and the WPO. Both can be read at ShineWhite.Home.Blog or email pantherlove@protonmail.com and request a copy of each. As White Panthers, we are more than a white support group for the NABPP. History has shown that white support groups advance the revolution. We as White Panthers recognize that we must be all the way revolutionaries that work diligently to organize and build anti-racist, anti-fascist, anti-capitalist, and other progressive consensus among poor whites who are also subjected to class oppression. As I already mentioned, it is our primary focus to transform these razor wire plantations into schools of liberation, and the oppressed communities into base areas of cultural, social, and political revolution. To do so, it's imperative that we re-educate our white brothers and sisters, as well as our non-binary comrades who have been deluded by racist, white supremacist propaganda and ideology into opposing their own class interests. With the help of anarchist comrades and my partner Nadia, we've started a WPO newsletter. A dope newsletter, I must say, that serves as an educational tool used to teach and popularize the history of our ancestors who recognized the need for resistance against slavery and recognized the need of class struggles, such as John Brown, Bill Blizzard, Marilyn Buck, Mother Jones, and many others. Prisons are seedbeds. This is where the revolutionary is grown. Our newsletter prunes and nurtures the reader, enabling them to blossom into all-the-way revolutionary thinkers. We have a toy drive for the children of prisoners. We understand the importance of family and the need of a father and in the lives of these children. At this time, we are limited to what we are able to do to ensure the relationships between these prisoners and their children remain strong and continue to grow. We did this toy drive to show prisoners as well as their families that the Panthers have their back. The first 30 prisoners who wrote us with their child's name, age, and address got toys sent to them with a message from their father. You know, we're just trying to serve the people. We have plans once this COVID-19 mess clears up to provide transportation for the families of prisoners who are unable to visit their incarcerated loved ones due to a lack of transportation. Strong family ties create strong community ties. Both are vital to advancement of our struggle. We have a couple of different endeavors in the works, such as an STG/SRG campaign to address the draconian policies that those of us who have been validated as a security threat group or security risk group are subjected to. This is something I will expand on later on in the interview. But I hope I am able to provide the resources needed to have Rochelle McGee released from prison. I intend to exhaust every avenue to have this done. Several of the elders have been released, most recently Jalil Muntakim. Rochelle is one of the longest-held political prisoners. He's been incarcerated since the 1960s, people. It's time that all put forth effort to have Rochelle McGee released. We, despite what political ideology you espouse, must work diligently to expose the use of the criminal injustice system as an instrument of political repression and demand amnesty for our imprisoned elders. Those of you who desire revolution, it's essential that you defend the imprisoned revolutionaries. This is an essential part of building for revolution.
You have received pushback from the NCDPS for your political organizing, including your call in 2018 for NC participation in the nationwide prison strike. Can you talk about the repression you faced?
As our Minister of Defense, Kevin Rashid, pointed out, quote, "Nothing is more dangerous to a system that depends on misinformation than a voice that obeys its own dictates and has the courage to speak out," unquote. Since gaining the support of my comrades on the outside who amplified my voice, I've been working diligently to report and pursue public exposure and redress of the brutality, torture, and abuses taking place within these razor wire plantations. As I mentioned earlier, the past 4 years of my incarceration were spent in solitary confinement. After calling for North Carolina prisoners to participate in the 2018 National Prison Strike, I was sent to NC's only Supermax unit at Polk Correctional. On this unit, the cells are secluded from everything and everyone. You don't leave your cell for nothing. A cell that's smaller than the average parking space at your local Walmart. While being held there, I witnessed prison guards wantonly murder prisoner Freddie Barn Pickett. I've exposed those involved as well as their claim that he had committed suicide. This got national attention, and some of those involved were fired. This is when the reprisals really intensified. On January 14th, 2019, my birthday, shards of glass were found in my food. A call to action was put out demanding that I be transferred. During the transfer, all of my personal belongings were lost. This has taken place several times. After organizing a hunger strike and my outside support network coordinating a phone zap to address the living conditions at Scotland Correctional, prison guards entered my cell and physically attacked me, fracturing my ribs as well as my right hand. I've been subjected to many forms of reprisals at the hands of my overseers and continue to this day to be subjected to harsh male censorship. Correctional officers spread propaganda that I'm a snitch. I've seen it all, and at times I almost allow it to deter me. But the words of Comrade George would enter my mind when I was weak. Quote, "If we accept revolution, we must accept all that it implies: repression, counterterrorism, days filled with work, nervous strain, prison, funerals," unquote. You can always tell how much of a threat you are by the intensity of the repression of the actions taken to suppress your advocacy efforts. Wait until we kick off this SRG campaign.
There are all sorts of organizations inside prison walls, and the WPO and affiliated New African Black Panther Party organizers have received persecution by authorities with the claim that these groups are SRGs or security risk groups. What is an SRG? How do you answer the charge of the accusation of being essentially a gang inside NC prisons? And how does its membership relate to other groups determined as SRGs?
Prison officials claim that a security risk group, SRG, is a group of prisoners that set themselves apart from the others, pose a threat to the security or safety of staff or other prisoners, or are disruptive to programs or the orderly management of the facility. Our Minister of Defense, Comrade Kevin Rashid, recently wrote a piece on this titled, "How the Pigs Abuse Gang Levels," explaining how the majority of SRG investigations and their staff are white and have been trained into a hostile doctrinaire view of the so-called gang culture. I can't speak about other states and how a prisoner becomes validated as a member of an SRG, but here in North Carolina, the slightest thing can get you validated, such as having a tattoo of stars or associating with prisoners who are already validated. The North Carolina Department of Public Safety, NCDPS, does not have an SRG policy in place to outline reasonable due process rights to dispute being validated or to present evidence that would prove that the claim being made against you are false. I know several prisoners who have been validated who are not affiliated with any group. They are subjected to repressive sanctions and discriminatory treatment, which have no reasonable purpose or justification. Some of these sanctions are, but are not limited to, longer solitary confinement terms than non-validated prisoners for rule violations that are not gang-related. Restriction to 2 15-minute phone calls a month. Please tell me how a father can maintain a healthy relationship with his child with only 2 phone calls a month. Harsher and often unreasonable censorship of mail, both incoming and outgoing. SRG staff use the claim that my mail is being denied due to it being SRG related. I deal with this at least 4 times a week. They use this to impede and disrupt my correspondences. Everything coming in from my partner Nadia is denied. She knows how harsh the censoring of my mail is. She has been dealing with it for over 1.5 years now. She isn't going to write anything out the way. But, yet Hitler's helpers find an excuse to deny her mail often. My mail is being held for weeks at a time before it is sent out, if it even is sent out. The incoming mail is held for weeks before it's even given to me. SRG feels as if they can do as they please, and until their arrogance and pompousness is checked, they will continue to do as they please. This is why it's imperative that we coordinate a campaign that we not only expose these SRG sanctions, but also compel public officials to redress the violation of our constitutional rights. This isn't just happening here in North Carolina. This is taking place across the nation, people. And as advocates inside and outside of prison, we must put our resources together and organize against this. Organize a campaign addressing the draconian policies that prisoners nationwide are subjected to. Next point. Prisoners who are validated are only permitted visits with immediate family members when there is no evidence to prove that visiting with someone beyond an immediate family member would be a threat to the safety of the facility. Prisoners who are validated are being denied access to any type of educational or rehabilitative programming. On February 5th of 2019, prison officials incorporated a policy that prohibited prisoners from receiving financial support from anyone that wasn't on the prisoner's approved visitation list. As I have mentioned, prisoners who have been validated can only receive visits from immediate family members. The majority of the prisoners who are in gangs come from broken families or have been raised by aunts and uncles. These restrictions target poor, black, and brown prisoners. If one has been adopted, or if their father, mother, sister, or brother has been convicted of a felony, they are unable to apply for visitation. The restriction has created an environment within these prisons that makes it hard for the average prisoner due to all of the strong-arming and extortion taking place from prisoners unable to receive financial support due to their SRG validation. But by creating such an environment, it solidifies the request for more funding to solve the so-called gang problems. It solidifies the 24-hour-a-day lockdowns. As far as the WPO and the NAABP being recognized as an SRG in North Carolina, that danger doesn't currently exist due to my relentless advocacy as to have both removed from the list as an SRG. This was done with the help of Senator Jay Swaddell, who sits on the Senate Select Committee for Prison Safety, as well as with the information provided by Comrade Malik Washington. You see, the U.S. Supreme Court has long held that minority/dissident groups such as WPO and NABPP have the same First Amendment right to engage in political expression and associate as do the 2 major political parties. The NABPP and the WPO are above-ground, communist, nonviolent, anti-racist, predominantly New African and white organizations/political parties. In no way do we promote anything illegal or gang-related. The courts outlawed censorship and discrimination against communist groups by government officials long ago. By pointing this out to prison administrators and showing case laws such as Brandenburg versus Ohio, I was able to have both the NABPP and the WPO removed from the list of recognized security risk groups. But still, this hasn't decreased the political intolerance shown by prison officials. I'm validated as a level 3 blood, the only white person in North Carolina validated as such. This stems from when I first entered the prison system back in the early 2000s. With this label on me, SRG staff use it to suppress my advocacy efforts, claiming that I am organizing gang members. To be completely honest, it's vital that we gain the support of the street formations. Their support is essential to redressing not only the SRG restrictions, but society as well. Both the government as well as these prison officials are aware of this. This is why they're diligently working to create situations and environments to keep the members of these street formations at each other's necks. For example, the J-pay restrictions I mentioned earlier that was incorporated on February 5th, 2019. By prohibiting prisoners who have been validated as an SRG from receiving financial support from anyone beyond immediate family, the policy has drastically increased the violence between the street formations within NC prisons. Poverty breeds violence. Not only has the policy increased the gang-on-gang violence, but also has fostered a very dangerous environment for those who are not affiliated with any of the street formations. Prisoners I've known for years are now joining these street formations just so they can enjoy the canteen that they're able to purchase. The miscreants who incorporated this policy claim it was done to prevent the strong-arming and other criminal activities that take place in NC prisons. This policy has done the opposite. These are not tactics only being used in North Carolina prisons. It's taken place nationwide. We as Panthers are working to build a clenched fist alliance that would unite all the street formations towards a common revolutionary alliance that would address the oppressive living conditions within all prisons. I'm aware that this is a colossal task, but it can be done and should be done. The members of the street formations relate to us and the Panthers relate to them, not relating to their lumpen tendencies, but along the lines that they are brothers and sisters who are from our communities, who are subjected to as many forms of oppression as the next person. Before I came to be a Panther myself, I was of the lumpen strata, just as each and every member of both the NABPP and the WPO were. The lumpen are not a class in the fullest sense, but part of the lower strata of the proletariat. Lumpen means broken. The lumpen proletariat are those who exist by illegal means or hustle. The street formations are made up of the lumpen proletariat. They've been conditioned to believe that the only way to survive is by illegal hustles, and in some of their situations this is true. Some of them cannot be reached, but there are many who can. By showing them patience and that we are dedicated to redressing issues that affect them, we're able to pantherize them, gaining their trust as well as their support. I'm in the trenches with these guys daily, and many of them are my close comrades. Their struggle is my struggle. There's other self-acclaimed prison activists within North Carolina prisons who consistently write about gang violence and how they are being affected by it and how the street formations are retaliating against them because of their advocacy efforts. I'm sure some of the listeners have read about this recently. I want to clarify something quickly before we move on to the next question. I've been on the front lines of this prison movement here in North Carolina for the past 6 years and have organized many demonstrations which had the support of the street formations. Not once have any members of these street formations attempted to retaliate against me. So for the prisoner who has been writing to those of y'all on the outside who publish and support our advocacy efforts here in North Carolina, telling the people that he was attacked by gang members because he had exposed the prison officials where he was being held at, it's a falsehood. I myself personally investigated his claims and found them to be untruthful. By lying, it only helps those who we're supposed to be fighting against. I know this doesn't relate to the question you asked, comrade, but I wanted to put it out there because this movement is very important to me. I've sacrificed so much, and I'm willing to sacrifice it all to assure the movement continues to thrive here in North Carolina. But as far as a relationship between myself and those of the street formations, I stand in solidarity with them and will continue to work diligently towards building a clenched fist alliance amongst them.
This is the Final Straw Radio Show, and I'm your host, William. You are listening to ShineWhite, who is incarcerated at Alexander CI in North Carolina, about the organizing that he does on the inside, some projects that he's working on, and some of his perspectives on being an incarcerated, radicalized organizer. You are hearing me and Bursts read out an interview that was conducted via mail over the course of a few weeks. And yeah, let's get back to it. Race in the U.S. is a major schism among the working classes that is used to pit us against each other, as is pretty standard in settler states founded by Great Britain. And prison hierarchies and organization reproduce and often improve upon those divisions. Can you talk about the importance of white folks and white prisoners in particular organizing in anti-racist formations like the WPO? And do you feel there is a danger to organizing along the lines of racialization rather than class lines?
As Comrade Kwame Nkrumah pointed out to us, quote, "Racist social structure is inseparable from capitalist economic development, for race is inextricably linked to class exploitation. In a racist capitalist power structure, capitalist exploitation and race oppression are complementary. The removal of the one ensures the removal of the other." Unquote. We Panthers and any other whites who are anti-racist, anti-capitalist, etc., have a special opportunity and responsibility to counter the influence of racist ideology and organizing within the working class and poor white communities by re-educating. By re-educating those who have been deluded by racist, white supremacist propaganda and ideology into opposing their own class interests, we can enable them to uphold proletarian internationalism and the unity of a multinational, multi-ethnic working class against national and capitalistic exploitation and oppression. The WPO recognizes this class struggle, but before we're able to organize as a multinational, multi-ethnic working class, it's our duty to make whites see themselves as they really are instead of as they think they are, to quote Karl Marx. The WPO refuses the concept of white power as well as the ideology of white supremacy. As Comrade Spidey, the original spokesperson of the WPO, recognized, white power not only fails to empower poor white people, it's a psychological trap that masses of people fall into that renders us politically impotent. We become unwitting tools of our own oppression. It blocks our only avenue of advancement, which is through class consciousness and unity. It makes us the unwitting tools of oppression of not only non-white people, but ourselves as well. When trying to educate white prisoners on the truth about race and why racism keeps us suppressed, the majority of them reply, "Why don't you never write or talk about blacks being racist?" And yes, I agree that there is such a thing as reverse racism. But as a white person, it's my duty to re-educate the whites, and it's the duty of any new African comrades to re-educate new Africans. How much success would I have if I attempted to talk to new Africans about why they shouldn't be racist? That's not my place. My place is to re-educate the whites. The United Panther movement recognizes that there's only one race, the human race. But if we're going to successfully combat racist oppression, we must recognize that discrimination comes down different on different groups of people, and that it is important to organize within each group of people in accordance with the way they are perceived in society. That's why there's a Black Panther, a White Panther, and a Brown Panther to carry out the task.
There has been an outbreak of COVID recently at Alexander CI, where you are imprisoned. I hope you've been able to avoid it. How has the NCDPS and your facility in particular handled the pandemic? How have prisoners reacted to the pandemic, and what, if anything, have you seen from outside supporters and the wider public a la COVID-19 and prisons?
Thank you for asking, comrade. In my opinion, supporters on the outside here in North Carolina fail to realize how grave the current living conditions are right now for prisoners during these unprecedented times. Those of us who are currently imprisoned are utterly at the mercy of the miscreants who patrol these concrete fields. With there already being issues of overcrowding in North Carolina prisons and prisoners being corralled in small housing areas, we're unable to maintain social distancing, to control our exposure to vectors for disease transmission, to choose the quality or type of mask we wear, unable to seek independent medical treatment, overall unable to protect ourselves from the coronavirus. This is in spite of several health experts having suggested that prisoners with upcoming release dates and at a high risk of medical harm be released from the custody of the DPS. They explained to prison officials that by doing so it would address the crowded living conditions that have led to numerous constitutional violations and has been the cause of several COVID outbreaks within North Carolina prisons. Prison officials claimed that if they were to release these prisoners, it wouldn't really make a difference. I'm inclined to disagree with that. To date, several prisoners who resided in the same blocks as I do have release dates within the next 2 months, yet are being held and impeded from earning any extra gain days that would enable them to be released as early as tomorrow. This is not unknown to prison officials. To keep it plain and simple, they just don't give a damn. The death of Miss Faye Brown proves it. She was a female prisoner who was held at the women's prison in Raleigh, North Carolina. At the age of 65, she died of COVID earlier this year. What's sad about this particular case is that prison officials had trusted Miss Brown enough to permit her to ride the city bus 5 days a week to Cheryl's School of Cosmetology, where she was employed as a teacher, unsupervised. It was evident that she wasn't a threat to society, but being that she had been convicted in 1975 of participating in a bank robbery in which her co-defendant killed a state trooper, Commissioner of Prisons Todd Ishii denied her an early release, which led to her death. I contracted the virus myself. It could have been avoided, but prison officials failed to take the proper steps that would have prevented this and would have saved the life of Jerry Combs. This was a prisoner housed in the same block as me who was showing all the symptoms of COVID, often complaining to the guards. He was able to get one of them to escort him to the nurse's station. He registered a temperature of 102 degrees. Instead of having him placed in a block that had been set up for quarantine, he was allowed to return to the block and move around, spreading the virus for 3 days before his test results came back positive. By this time, several prisoners out of the 48 who lived in B block were showing symptoms of COVID. On November 2nd, prison administrators had the block locked down and all 48 prisoners were tested for COVID. It was 21 prisoners who had tested positive. Mr. Jerry Combs, as well as myself, were not of those 21 prisoners. But being that prison officials compelled us to remain in the block with those who had tested positive, those who hadn't tested positive eventually did. Mr. Jerry Combs contracted it, complained to medical staff and prison officials that he needed medical attention beyond some non-aspirins. Prison officials allowed his pleas to fall on deaf ears. 2 days later, he was found dead in his cell. Prison officials quickly claimed that he had committed suicide by overdosing on his medications. I know this to be untrue. They are only trying to cover their tail, as they always do. Despite 3 prisoners dying of COVID here at Alexander, the precautionary steps that should have been taken to prevent this are not being taken. They continue to move prisoners around, as guards fail to wear their masks, and we are not being given the needed disinfectants to disinfect any living spaces. This will continue until supporters intensify the struggle on the outside. I'll be honest, this is my opinion. North Carolina movements on the outside need to step it up on all levels. I know what I'm about to say will ruffle some feathers, but I'm speaking the truth. The inhumane living conditions prisoners in North Carolina are forced to endure could be ameliorated if outside supporters would take the advice of certain prisoners who have proven to be able to organize those within the walls. This struggle is one that requires much work and dedication. This isn't just a weekend thing. We all have to be on the same page if we're going to compel prison officials to make changes that would enable prisoners to successfully rehabilitate themselves. NC prisons are among the 5 states across the nation that don't have tablets. We're forced to remain locked in our cells, no access to educational programming or rehabilitation programming. The primary objective is to rehabilitate the prisoners, correct? Well, that just isn't the case here. Article 2 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, set forth by the United Nations, says everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. One of the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration is the right to education, as stated in Article 2, Section 6. Yet prisoners here in North Carolina are denied higher education because of our states of incarceration. This is blatant discrimination. Y'all on the outside are being told that we are being offered educational opportunities. This is a lie. What does this have to do with COVID? Well, I just wanted to point out that it shouldn't take a pandemic for those on the outside to organize to redress these living conditions. It should be taken serious at all times. As I already mentioned, I'm working on an SRG campaign that would address the draconian policies prisoners are subjected to. If you'd like to know more about it and how you can help, write me. Joseph Stewart, number 080-2041, Alexander CI, 633 Old Landfill Rd, Taylorsville, North Carolina, 28681. Or email my support network at pantherlove@protonmail.com and someone will contact you. 2021 is upon us. Let's make this the year of intensifying the struggle on all levels. Bridges have to be built. Meaningful working relationships have to be built. It takes both the prisoners and those on the outside. Prisoners have to see the fruit first before they are willing to put the work in that's needed to ameliorate the situation.
It's sad, but it's true. You must keep in mind that many of us have been abandoned by family members and other loved ones, so they find it hard to believe that there are people on the outside that care about their well-being when their own family doesn't. By showing prisoners that you are willing to struggle with them, you gain their trust and support, which is necessary if we aim to mobilize and organize.
How do you see the struggle against racialized capitalism in the so-called U.S. developing moving forward into a Biden presidency, and what suggestions do you have to organizers on either side of the razor wire?
As Mark Twain pointed out to us, quote, "If voting could change anything, they wouldn't let us do it," unquote. It doesn't matter who is the president, because they all share the same objective, expanding the dominance of capitalism. As long as the masses maintain constituent allegiance to the parties such as the Democrat and Republican parties, racial capitalism will continue to thrive and expand. A vote for any representative of either party is a vote of confidence in the reformability of capitalism and a vote against the need for socialist revolution. If we're going to advance the struggle against racial capitalism, we must stand in implacable opposition to the dual parties of capitalism. If the overall objective is to create a mass-oriented socialist system of mutual cooperation, fair and equal distribution, that would benefit us all, certain methods will have to be adopted in order to be compatible with the newer systems which we the people are trying to establish. The primary method should be eradicating racism and taking an empathic stand against the false ideology of white supremacy. Both allowed capitalism to be sustained. Dividing the working class along racial lines is key to maintaining capitalist rule in the U.S., and the state is conscious of the social power that the proletariat would attain through unified struggle. The ruling class utilizes divide-and-conquer strategies that have proven effective for over 400 years now. The most important factor in the advancement of our struggle is action. We must begin to put our thoughts and strategies into action. Comrades, without action there is no mobility. Moving forward, we must intensify the struggle at all levels. This includes lines of communication between prisoners and those of you on the outside. We mustn't continue to operate from old strategies that are not effective. It's a waste of time and energy. Those on the outside must do more to support the prison movement here in North Carolina and across the nation. Changes don't happen without reason. People must become the reason.
Well, we thank you for your time, and I really appreciated this interview. Before we wrap up, do you have anything else you would like to share with the listening audience?
Yes, it's imperative that I thank my support network. Without their support and love, I would be one of the many prisoners here in North Carolina whose screams for help fall on deaf ears. Drea, my comrade out on the West Coast, I love you deeply, friend. You have stuck by me throughout it all. I have so much to thank you for, I don't know where to start, nor where to end. Just know that I'm grateful and that I cherish our friendship. Professor Victor Wallace, thank you for all the educational material and for taking the time out of your busy life to educate and mentor me from many miles away and through the razor wire and concrete. You deserve to be acknowledged even though I know you don't desire it. Thank you, friend. I'm grateful. Penelope, even though all the work you do is unknown and behind the scenes, it's imperative that you know that without you and the desire you have to support the struggle any way that you can, our newsletter may not have made it off the ground. When you are absent, you are missed. Thank you for all you do. Leah, in a short matter of time, I have so much to thank you for. You go to the extreme to make sure that I know that you care about me as well as my well-being. Even though our political praxis are somewhat different, you're dedicated to ameliorating the living conditions prisoners are forced to endure. Thank you for all that you do for me on a personal level and the love you give. You are loved. Nadia, I know the listening audience can't see the smile I have on my face, but thinking of you causes the biggest smiles. I want to thank you for your willingness to compromise. I know that you are a serious anarchist and you are against organizations and uplifting the names of them. I just want everyone listening to know that you helped me revamp the WPO. It was dead within these razor wire plantations. With you at my side, I was able to bring it back to life. You dedicate so much time to both our newsletter as well as the new NABPP newspaper. I know you would disagree with this, but you are a Panther. May it be an anarchist Panther. You are still a Panther. I love you endlessly, and you are my best friend. Also, big salutes to Comrade Rashid, Keith Malik Washington, Jason Renard Walker, and Kwame Shakur. I see your vision, comrade. I'm with you. Let's make it happen. And I would like to thank the Final Straw Radio for giving us a platform and for amplifying our voice. Thank you. All power to the people.
That was the interview with ShineWhite, an incarcerated comrade who is in Alexander CI in North Carolina. And now here are some words from anarchist prisoner Sean Swain commemorating those lives lost to police violence in 2020.
What you say, what you say, what you say, what? We'll come like a flood.
The following is a continuation of the segment that aired on January 3rd. The information was compiled by the website killedbypolice.net. Juan Ayon Barraza, Salvatore Frisia, Anthony Wilson, Jasmine Washington, Derek L. Powell, Marcus Eugene Epps, Stephen Taylor, Willie J. Hampton, Austin Dean Heights, Mason Workman, Virgil Thrope, Chase Rosa, Nicholas Chavez, Elmer L. Mack, Christopher Lawson, an unidentified person, Joshua Johnson, Luan Agoli, Fred Brown, Michael Ramos, Timothy Darrell Slides, Brandon Reed Nylander, Marlon Aaron Bonds, Roy Joyner, Reed Rickabaugh, Farron Morris Hammond, Bradley G. Pullman, D. Quang Tran, Christopher Aguirre, Robert Musser, Jonas Joseph, William E. Abbey, Jesus Caballero, Artemio Mondragon Alfaro, Malcolm Xavier Ray Williams, Daniel Hernandez, Timothy Allen Gilbert, William D. Bose, Nicholas Bills, Sean Lee Furr, an unidentified person, Brent Martin, Saeed Joquin, Spencer Calvert, Michael Ferguson, Courtney Sean Price, Michael Ferries, Felipe Pereira, Armando Salvatierra, Chad Adams, Philip Michael Carney, Tyler Wayne Crott, Mark Anthony Jones, DeMontre Bruner, Kavon Webb, Sandra Lee Harmon, William Shimp, Justin Charland, Jashawn Yandi Hodge, Alfredo de la Rosa, Dreas John Reed, an unidentified person, James Joseph James, Vincent Ralph Pena, Ruben Escarrega, James Pease, Mikhail Rose, Daniel Gomez, Adrian Medeiros, Lloyd Nelson, Edgar Melgar, Finan H. Burhay, Yassine Mohammed, Darren John Patterson, Jonathan Carter, Jane Thompson, Ward Benjamin McLean, David Urea, an unidentified person, Gregory Howe, David Tylik Atkinson, Rayshard Scales, Robert Tincher, Anthony Isaac, Donnie Leake, Anthony Angel, Took Fem, Robert Avila, Hunter Karlstrom, Robert Johnson, Wallace Dean Staples, Randy Rozelle Lewis, Juan M. Montalvo, Brian Cooper, Bernard Ledlow, Robert Wayne Lawson, Jacob Bubb, Levy Morse, Wilbon Cleveland Woodard, Taylor Hayes, Terry Caver, an unidentified person, Toby Wiggins, Stoney Ramirez, Ryan Whitaker, Willie Lee Quarles, Bernardo Palacios Carbajal, Maurice S. Gordon, Christopher Clark, Gary Kevin Parton, Michael Snyder, Anthony Grove, Gary P. Dorton, Joe Louise Castellanos, Dion Johnson, Raymar Gagarin, Justin Mink, Richard Councilman, Jason Jesse Gallegos, Kenneth Bennett, John Alvarado, Tracy Drown, David Marquez, Robert Avatia, John Vick, John Allen Dunway, Tony McDade, Joshua Blessed, Rommel Mendoza, Hector Hernandez, Alexander Scott, Channing Lamar Spivey, Modesto Reyes, John Benedict Coleman, Stephen Edward Ferguson, Reuben Smith, Robert Whitehead, Heba Mumtaz Al-Ashari, an unidentified person, Terrell Mitchell, Mamadou Lamin Sissay, Jarvis Sullivan, Derek Thompson, Israel Berry, Thomas Sutherland.
You can write to Sean Swain at his latest address at Sean Swain, number 2015638, Buckingham Correctional, P.O. Box 430, Dillwyn, Virginia, 23936. You can find his past writings, recordings of his audio segments, and updates on his case at SeanSwain.org, or now follow him on Twitter at @SwainRocks.
So, hey everyone, it's William here. To round out the hour, I would like to play a song for y'all, but I'd like to say a few words about it first, just kind of off the cuff and not really based in research or whatever. So the song that I would like to play is called The Rosenbergs, and it's by the R.J. Phillips Band. So, this is obviously a song about Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, who were both born, I think, in the like early mid 19 teens. Ethel was born in Manhattan, in New York City, and I think Julius was a Russian immigrant. They were both Jewish people. And I think Julius moved to New York City when he was like maybe 8 or 9, something like that. And they're most famous for actually being executed. They were both executed by use of the electric chair in the 1950s. Julius had been, I think, in the Army Corps of Engineers, and he was working on some kind of, state project, atomic stuff or whatever. And he was convicted or came under suspicion of, passing information to the Soviet Union, which, obviously, as anarchists here on the show, we don't mess with collaborating with the state in any way, and the Soviet Union definitely counts as having been a gigantic state. But he and she eventually were both convicted of espionage, and there was a fairly lengthy grand jury trial. There's a bunch of information about this on the internet if people are interested in learning more, a bunch of books. I'm sure there's a Wikipedia article about it. But, I think they were notable the way that they died, the way that they were killed, because I believe that they were the first U.S. citizens to be convicted or to be killed by the state for charges of espionage, maybe even treason. I'm not sure about that. And I think it was also notable that Ethel was one of the first women to be executed in this way, maybe ever. Check me on that, but maybe ever. And they were also notably like, they were executed during peacetime, or so-called peacetime. It was the Cold War at the time. But their execution became worldwide news. There was an incredibly staunch movement for clemency for them. And just like the way that their execution was publicized was extremely gruesome, extremely graphic, and was like, you know, extremely upsetting, because the electric chair is a really ugly way to go, not to put too fine a point on it. And I do think that the fact that they were both Jewish people, I'm sure that anti-Semitism played a role in the decision by the state to execute these two people. So all of that being said, I think that, you know, the song is from a child's perspective, of a child who knew them both growing up, who, like, the child lived in New York City at the time. And I think it's good, I don't know, to kind of keep in mind that, you know, folks from history, even, you know, folks who figure so prominently in our understanding of history and understanding of really horrific acts by the state, such as the death penalty, like had lives and had friends and had, you know, problematic TV shows, which the song talks about, that they loved. And, you know, in these last days of the Trump administration, how executions are, you know, only ramping up. And I think it's, you know, for me at least, like, cool to see a through line for history, and, you know, yeah, just to keep in mind. So let us know what you think of the song, and if you have a perspective on the Rosenbergs that you want to share with us, you can email us at thefinalstrawradio@riseup.net. And also, if you have a musical project that you want to see amplified, and you're coming from, you know, an anarchist-ish or anti-imperialist, anti-colonial, anti-racist, anti-sexist perspective, also email us. And if you want to see your song on the radio, we would be happy to help make that possible. So yeah, here is the song. It is, again, The Rosenbergs by the R.J. Phillips Band. And you can find them on SoundCloud, which is where we found this song initially, just by searching their name, or the title of the song. Anyway, thanks y'all for listening. Did I not mention that it's a rock ballad? Because it's a rock ballad.
Michael and Robbie were my friends. They used to live next door. We'd play outside on sunny days, walk to the corner store. Their mom Ethel stayed at home. She loved to serenade. I can still remember the music that she made. Sometimes the dad would take us on a trip to Prospect Park. We'd get peanuts, feed the squirrels until it got dark. Then we'd take the subway